Dave, I think we've all heard that the initial plan for WrestleMania 4 was for Ted DiBiase to win the tournament and become the WWF champion. Why did that change?
I don't know the answer as to why exactly. I think that what happened was that the plan was for Randy Savage to win the Intercontinental Championship from the Honky Tonk Man on the live show a couple months earlier. So Randy would be Intercontinental Champion and Ted would be WWF Champion, and then they would feud when Hogan left because Hogan was leaving to do I remember No Holds Barred or Suburban Commando or whatever.
That would have been No Holds Barred, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so he was leaving to do he was going to be gone for a couple months to do a movie, so he was going to he wasn't going to be the champion. So the idea was that Ted would be the heel champion and Randy would be the babyface chasing him. And when Honky didn't do the job for Savage, somehow there were some discussions. And they were all mad at Honky Tonk Man and we're going to take it back at him, and which they eventually did. But in that whole thing, it was kind of like, you know what? Somebody came up with the idea. Hey, what about instead of building for a year to Hogan and DiBiase, which was the plan, how about we have like a big feud over Elizabeth with Hogan and Savage? And that sounded like so much of a better idea. And it was so much of a better idea because it was probably the greatest program in the history of the company. So they made the switch and they went with Savage, with Hogan helping Savage, which at the time I thought was like, God, you're making a new champion. He's still subservient to Hogan. Hogan pretty much gave him the title, but it played out the fact that Hogan did help him win the title. When Savage turned on Hogan, it was another layer of that story. So there was a reason that they did that. And, the whole thing was to, Savage would go babyface and for a long time. And then, come WrestleMania, the build to WrestleMania, they do the big split between the two of them. And you go with Hogan and Savage with Elizabeth in the middle. And, that was one of the most successful WrestleManias they ever did.
From a pay-per-view buy standpoint, certainly. Now, when
it was the record until 99.
Wow.
And when you consider how many more homes had pay-per-view in 99 than in 88, right? Well, in 89 would have been the big Hogan Savage.
Right, WrestleMania 5, 89, WrestleMania 4, which we're talking about now, is 88.
Right. So, yeah, because that was the 89 match. So from 89 to 99, we probably went from, I don't know, 25 million to 60 million homes, and he still kept that record for all those years. That's a pretty impressive record.
Were they thinking at any point, Dave, when the plan on the drawing board was for Savage to go into WrestleMania 4 as Intercontinental Champion, of rematching him with Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 4?
We all thought that was going to happen when they did the brackets because Steamboat was going to wrestle Greg Valentine, and I forgot who Savage wrestled in the first round off the top of my head. But we knew, by the time WrestleMania came around, okay, we knew that Randy was going to win. Okay, I mean, just the way the bracketing was when because they had a set of brackets, and then when they switched to from DiBiase winning to Randy winning, they changed the brackets completely. So as soon as they changed the brackets, I'm going like, there's a reason these brackets are changing, and it was to me looking at it's because they're going to go with Randy. So that wasn't a surprise, and then but I thought Steamboat's beating Greg Valentine for sure, and then they're going to do Steamboat and Savage, which at the time would have been a babyface match. So I thought that would be really cool to do that rematch, but they had Greg win, so we never got the match.
Interesting. Yeah, you don't think there was any allowance to still do Savage and Steamboat in their heads and have Savage go through after beating Steamboat and avenging that huge loss? I feel like that would be a great momentum builder for the tournament final.
Yeah, I thought so, and many people in the company thought so when those bracketing was done, and I know Steamboat thought so. And the day of the show, it was like Greg's going over. Nobody knew that the day of the show. Everyone knew that the finish was going to be Savage, but nobody knew like the finish of all those other matches, like to get there.
Yep.
So everybody in the company that I was, kind of just nobody knew, but they all figured, yeah, Steamboat's going to beat Valentine, and we're going to get the Savage Steamboat rematch, and they just made the call not to do that.
It was Butch Reed, by the way, that Savage went with first in the opening bracket there at WrestleMania 4. And he becomes the champion, and we have a successful event. But it goes from, Dave, 93,000 strong crowd at WrestleMania 3 to the Trump Plaza for 2 years in a row. Why, such a dramatic shift in scale for WrestleMania?
Well, the difference is Donald Trump paid for the show. the live event. So they got they had never gotten rights fees. That's what boxing would get. So all of a sudden they're getting not a rights fee, but a sites fee. They got a site fee from Trump for those 2 years. The problem was that it was the audience that went didn't make a lot of noise in both years. I thought both of those WrestleManias were bad shows. The 88 was the one that went head to head with Flair and Sting, in Greensboro, which was on free television, which I just thought, I thought Flair and Sting just blew them out of the water, because that was a great show with that, and then Midnight Express Fantastics match too. And then the WrestleMania was just like dead crowd for almost everything. I mean, the Savage DiBiase match was good, but it wasn't great, and so much of that undercard, they needed a Savage Steamboat. They didn't have, and there was nothing close to a Savage Steamboat on that undercard. And then they came back the next year, and then after the next year where they had the dead crowd except for the Hogan Savage match, then that's when they kind of made the call that we may be getting a site fee, but these shows are crappy, so we're going to go somewhere else.
I see. How much do you think they got in the site fee?
I don't know. But they actually, as far as the gate went,
right.
The gate, as I recall, the first gate did not beat the Silverdome gate. I think it was like in the 1.2 million range, maybe. The second gate broke was one, I think it was 1/6/28. So they actually broke the Pontiac record for the 89 Mania, even though it was like 18,000 people versus 78,000 people.
You mentioned Flair Sting, and the Royal Rumble launch is about to come to mess with a WCW pay-per-view. Talk about the competitive environment at the time, about running head-to-head on the same night between NWA and WWF.
Yeah, I mean, what happened? I'm trying to remember how the chronology went. So this is in the first blood was actually Vince, as far as, and it was a key one, because what happened was the Jim Crockett Promotions, they were not WCW yet,
right?
And Jim Crockett Promotions, which was called the NWA, they had booked Starrcade '87. On Thanksgiving night, I believe it was Thanksgiving night. If not, it was Thanksgiving weekend. I think it was Thanksgiving night. I'm almost certain in Chicago. In fact, I am certain. So Vince comes in. This is after WrestleMania 3, which was a huge success on pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Crockett had never done a pay-per-view. So Crockett signs all of his guys to big money contracts with the idea we're going to do 4 pay-per-views a year and we're going to make millions of dollars on all these pay-per-views, because Vince is making millions of dollars. And I think in their mind, it's just like, we got a better product than he does. And they did. They had a better wrestling product than Vince had. There were markets they could beat Vince. I mean, they were not beating Vince nationally by any means, but with adults, their ratings were pretty even. I mean, Vince beat them with kids. But when it came to adults, the Crockett ratings were pretty good. So they booked Starrcade for Thanksgiving. Then Vince, after this is announced, makes the announcement that we're going to book a pay-per-view on Thanksgiving, which was the original Survivor Series. So Crockett goes, you know what? We're going to do something for the cable companies. Didn't know what to do. It's like, we got these two things. They're going head to head, and they were everyone's leaning for the most part towards going with Vince, because Vince just came off of WrestleMania 3. Vince has the proven track record. These other guys have no track record at all. Plus, Vince is coming out of New York, and he had more publicity, and he had the other WrestleManias that were more well known. He was number one at the time. So the cable companies, for the most part, they're leaning towards going to Vince, but a lot of them made promises to Crockett. So then Crockett goes, here's what we'll do. We'll move to the afternoon. So we're not going to go head to head. We'll move. And Thanksgiving afternoon, as far as on pay-per-view goes, was a far less attractive time slot than Thanksgiving night. Mm-hmm. So he took the weaker thing, so he wouldn't have to go head to head with Vince, and so the cable companies wouldn't have to make a choice. So then the cable companies were thrilled by this, because it's like, man, we got 2 of the biggest pro wrestling shows on the same day, one right after the other. So they started doing this marketing campaign. The idea that there was going to be a national marketing campaign For $35, you get 2 shows. I think that was the number, but it was going to be like, let's say both were 20, or maybe they're both 25, whatever the number was. It was going to be a thing where you would get a discount if you ordered both, and they figured, if we give a discount, everyone's going to order both. We're going to make so much money. This is going to be great. So then Vince came back, so it was almost like Vince didn't want to do Survivor Series. He wanted to kill Jim Crockett, right? He wasn't looking to help Jim Crockett's business by
right.
putting like having these companies.
A twofer.
Yeah, do a twofer, exactly. So it almost backfired. So Vince goes back and he's got to be the bad guy now. So he went to the cable companies and he goes, well, here's the deal. Any one of you cable companies who broadcasts the Jim Crockett show, you cannot get Survivor Series, and you cannot get WrestleMania next year. I will not let you have a WrestleMania. Which, you got to remember that WrestleMania with the Hogan Andre, that was the biggest thing ever on pay-per-view up until that point in time. So it was like, that was a hell of a power play. When you talk about not only, okay, maybe these pay-per-views are of equal value, maybe Vince is a little more, but we're not going to back down to Vince's power play. But then when he said WrestleMania, pretty much everyone backed down except for the companies in the Carolinas who figured that they can do more business with Crockett than Vince, which they would have done in that part of the country. And there were 2 other companies, by coincidence, one of which was the local company that was in San Jose, which had nothing to do with me, but it had everything to do with me because that's where I lived. So I was one of the few people who actually could see Starrcade. So again, with me, it was like we watched Starrcade. I had people from all over the Bay Area came over to my house to watch Starrcade, and then we all in our cars went up to a friend in Foster City, which was about 40 minutes away, and then we watched the Survivor Series, so we got to watch both. But the thing was, and in San Jose, with that, I remember asking, I go like, why are you doing this? Because Crockett, Vince's stuff was far more popular here than Crockett. It was just like, we're not going to back down to that bully. And I go, well, good for you, not backing down that bully. There were 2 companies outside the Carolinas in the whole country, out of the hundreds and hundreds. And in my city, we were one of the ones that wasn't going to back down. And, luck to me, I got to watch both shows because of it.
Now, it's my understanding, Dave, that WrestleMania 4 was the first one made available exclusively on pay-per-view. That is to say, no.
There were still some closed circuit for 4 and 5, but it was whittled down a lot. I think by 6 there wasn't any. But it was the first one that was marketed primarily because WrestleMania 3 was a combination of both. WrestleMania 3, there were only 5 million homes out of the whole country that got pay-per-view. So it was primarily closed circuit. They did, I believe, 450,000 closed circuit and 400,000 on pay-per-view and that was the most closed circuit they ever did was WrestleMania 3. So that was the most successful by far up to that point in time. And then, for 4, the closed circuit was way down. The pay-per-view was up because more homes had pay-per-view. And then for 5, the pay-per-view was phenomenal. And the closed circuit still existed, but it was much more limited.